I know I've said it so many times before, but I just love this island. I feel so much at peace, and I'm full of gratitude that my life has changed to such a point where I found peace and happiness on this island.
She was a girl with a divided heart, like the light and the dark, the divided heart, between two continents and somewhere far home, but where it really lay was deep within her soul. But where it really lay was deep within her soul.
Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Micki Pistorius, Profiler on Record. And by now you've watched the last episode, episode 10 of the television series Catch Me a Killer, based upon my book Catch Me a Killer. So in this episode we meet Velaphi Ndlangamandla, and the setting for this investigation is Piet Retief. Now, Piet Retief is a very rural little town in the province of Mpumalanga, and it was named after a Boer general called Piet Retief, who was killed by Dingaan, the king of the Zulus. And this area is also very well known for forestry. So on the outskirts of the little town of Piet Retief, we found Posa Village, the settlement. Now, before the ANC government came into power, it was still an area of segregation. And even after, in the 1990s, when they were in power, there was still segregation of the different areas. The houses in Posa Village, some of them are built by mud and wattle, and some of them are brick. But they are more permanent constructions that we would find in the rural areas of KwaZulu-Natal. And amongst these houses in Posa Village, we find shebeens. Shebeen is a bar. In the 1950s, there was a big shebeen culture in South Africa, where people would come together after work and they would drink and they would have fun and they would dance and they would make music, and there was always this shebeen queen that ran the shebeen. So in this episode, the killer strikes first in one of these shebeens, and he walks in, lifts his rifle, and he shoots at random. And the aftermath of this massacre is vividly depicted in the series. It is very traumatic. And the detective Rob, in this case played by another seasoned actor, Frank Rautenbach, dubbed this investigation the Saloon killer because the rifle that was used is a .22 Saloon rifle. What struck me from the beginning in this case was very peculiar, as there was no obvious signs of sexual interference for the victims. One of the victims in the shebeen was raped, but not by the killer, as it turned out. In all the other investigations, there wasn't sexual element to the investigation. Even in the Cape Town prostitute case, where the killer was impotent, he raped one of the victims with a bottle. But in this case, there was no obvious sexual interference. This made it a little bit very, very peculiar and interesting to me. Now, I'd like to tell you about Maslow. Maslow was a psychologist, and he had a theory based on the hierarchy of needs. And it is a pyramid structure with 5 tiers of needs. So what he said, the first tier was the basic needs of every human being. Those are survival. It is sex, aggression, hunger, sleep, etc. Those are your basic needs. The second tier is the need for safety, the need for security. The third need is the need to belong to a tribe, to a community, to a family, to belong to someone, to be loved. The fourth one is the need for recognition, for achievements. And this is social recognition, etc. But this is often tied in modern times to wealth. And then the top of the pyramid is the need for self-actualization. And that means becoming the best person that you can become. This is the time where we transcend pettiness. It's a time of spirituality. Now, remember in a previous episode, I spoke about the Greek symbol for delta. and it needs to change and to transcend. And this is also the tier or the human need where you show compassion and kindness to humankind at the top. That fits in with our theory of mind. So if we keep Maslow's hierarchy of needs in mind, also later on, when we have another series of Micki Pistorius Profiler on Record, we will have a look at female killers and what motivates them. And Maslow's theory of needs will feature prominently there as well. But just suffice to say, at this stage, the difference between male serial killers and female serial killers is male serial killers killed for sex. It's a basic need. And female serial killers kill for security, the second tier. What was very interesting is I couldn't find the sexual element in this investigation in the beginning. Right, so that puzzled me. I just want to put it on record as well. I've never attended a crime scene where a person died in my arms. This is dramatization and creative licensing, but it fits in very well with the storyline. It's very captivating at this stage. So what was a very strong element in this case was the military element. This killer shot like a trained sniper. He would hit his victims 2 centimeters above their eye, either the left or the right. He was very well trained shooting. He also wore a balaclava. He wore an army coat. This is what the witnesses told us. And in cases where he took anything, it would be objects like tin can food that a soldier would need for survival. So a very strong military element here. And that is why we requested the army to send us a covert operation, and they would infiltrate the population and stay amongst them and keep their eye out for the killer. It was also necessary because in case the killer shot again in a shebeen or somewhere, then we had the army guys who could eliminate him and protect our community. So we had plenty suspects again in this investigation. And in the series, it is depicted that Micki is very argumentative with the detectives, although in this case, it wasn't really so. This investigation team cooperated with each other, with me. We were synchronized. We really worked hard. And I think what was a little bit frustrating was the fact that I couldn't be there all the time with them. The dialogue in this episode as well is also very, very good, except for the one place where Micki tells the detective, well, go off, chop, chop. I would never speak to a detective like that. That's just plain disrespectful. In any case, we were all under a lot of stress because every time they arrested a suspect, the killings would escalate. So obviously it wasn't the guy that they arrested. Micki's post-traumatic stress disorder at this stage was also spinning out of control, and there were breakdowns. And the detectives were very protective and supportive towards me when this happened. It also had a toll on my private life, and we see dearest handsome Mark becoming metaphorical victim of the serial killers. And this also happened in my real life. The relationship was ended. So kudos again to Charlotte Hope for getting inside my head and the way that I get into serial killers' head. She's really, really good. She even writes with her left hand. Thank you, Charlie. That was really, really good. In this series, we see Micki lecturing. That was why I couldn't be with the investigation all the time. I started my courses. And one of the detectives asks her, but how can we empathize with evil? And she answers, remember, they were not always like that, as they are now. And again, in previous episodes, I'm not admonishing parents, but how do we raise our children? Serial killers are not spawned by aliens. They are not an alien species. They are not comic book superheroes. They are not AI-created monsters. They are ordinary people, born and raised by ordinary parents. What are we telling our children? Children are just children. Yes, they are. But every time there is an incident of children misbehaving and throwing tantrums, etc., isn't that a golden opportunity for a parent or an adult to guide the child? I'm sure it is. Or instead, would we indulge their tantrums and their manipulations and etc., and in that way we are encouraging self-centered narcissistic behavior that can escalate. So a little bit of an educational value here. Some people think that all serial killers are psychopaths. They refer to them as psychopaths. First of all, the term psychopath is not really correct. It's a term that the lay public use. The correct term is antisocial personality disorder. It's a personality disorder. So I would like to read to you from our little DSM diagnosis book on what an antisocial personality disorder diagnosis is. It says there is a conduct. It starts at least 18. There is evidence of a conduct disorder with the onset before the age 15, indicated by a history of 3 or more of the following. The child was often truant. He ran away from home overnight at least twice. There are physical fights. He used a weapon in more than one fight. Forced someone into sexual activity. Physically cruel to animals. Physically cruel to other people. Deliberately destroying other people's property. Deliberately engaged in fire setting, often lied, stolen without confrontation of a victim, stolen with confrontation of a victim. And then there is also behavior after the age of 15. The person is unable to sustain consistent work behavior. The person fails to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behavior. There is antisocial acts. The person is irritable and aggressive. It repeatedly fails to honor financial obligations. The person cannot plan ahead or is impulsive, etc., and so it goes on. So that is our diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. So what is quite clear about antisocial personality disorder is their sense of callousness. It is all about themselves, and I need to say, not all serial killers are psychopaths, and not all psychopaths are serial killers. And not all psychopaths, or psychopaths is not diagnosed as a mental illness. They are not crazy. So, antisocial personality disorder is one of a range of personality disorders, and those are divided into clusters. And these clusters can include narcissistic, paranoid, avoidance, schizoid, borderline, passive aggression, and others, but they are personality disorders. So an antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder are similar in the sense that both display a lack of compassion and empathy for others. They take advantage of others for their own benefit. There is a callousness. But the narcissist has the added characteristic that they believe in their own grandiosity and their sense of entitlement. They were indulged for the demanding immediate gratification of their needs, while the antisocial personality disorder is characterized by unreliability, lies, and cruelty to others and animals, and most likely very early criminal behavior. So a personality disorder is summarized as traits of the person's long-term functioning. It is pervasively embedded into their personality, and it causes significant impairments in their interpersonal, social, and occupational functioning. The personality disorder is therefore not a mental disorder, like depression, anxiety disorders, organic brain disorders, autism, schizophrenia, which is quite different than dissociative identity disorder, just by the way. So not all mental disorders either are so severe that they require institutionalization. Most people are on medication and they can function in their daily lives. So I hope that clears it up. Personality disorders are not mental disorders. They're very different. Right. So in the series as well, one of the detectives asks Micki, what is the first piece or the best piece of advice that you could give us? And she says, never underestimate your gut. Now, your gut is also your intuition. And in that sense, a little bit of a neuroscientific information for you. Dr. James Kennedy, in an article, Psychology Today, discusses neuroception, how a heightened sense of intuition can influence decision-making, problem-solving, and creativity. Neuroception was coined by Professor Stephen Porges of the University of North Carolina, and it refers to our ability to detect safety or danger cues in the environment without conscious awareness. Remember in a previous episode when I told you my eyes had seen the snake and the reaction, that was subconscious. But neuroception is also active within a social context. It allows us to read between the lines, to pick up on unspoken emotions, to sense the atmosphere in a room or on a crime scene. Your intuition would warn you not to trust a stranger, even if your financial security means you really want a job, wants you to go with that person. And that is Maslow's second tier of security. Do not believe his promise of employment. Intuition and neuroception is also what aided me on those crime scenes, getting into the mind of the serial killer. So there's nothing hocus pocus about it. It is scientific. So more and more, as I got into the mind of this killer, I realized the sexual element is there, but it is not on the crime scene. The sexual element is within the killer themselves. And the killer is probably impotent. And the rifle manifested or represented an extended phallus to the killer. So every time that he pulled the trigger, it was a mental ejaculation. Could have been physical as well, but mentally. So that is what was happening. The gun itself was the sexual object. And that is why he was indiscriminate whether he shot adult men or women. To him, it didn't matter. Pulling the trigger made him feel omnipotent, and there lied the sexual gratification with him, not on the crime scene. So we figured him out. So I also said he would probably somewhere in the forest have a secret hideout where he would bury this gun, because this gun was his sexual object and it was so protected of it. Now, the scene of the helicopter hovering above the crime scene and Micki showered with maggot, that is historically accurate. It did happen. Although it didn't happen in this case, it happened in one of the later cases that I was investigating. And in that real life case, I was sitting on a hill and sitting next to a body, a fresh body, that had been left on top of an old decomposing body. And the decomposing body was full of maggots. So I requested, again, a police dog, and woof to the police dogs, to be brought to that hill so that the police dogs can find more bodies on the hill. For some reason, they decided that the police dog would be taken via a helicopter. We had to climb the hill. So next time, if I get reincarnated, I want to be a police dog because I get a lift by a helicopter. But in any case, the helicopter pilot made a mistake because he hovered right over that crime scene. And the wind of the blades of the helicopter lifted all those maggots. And Erica and myself were showered with buckets full of maggots. And they were in those moments, and they were in our hair and in our clothes and everywhere. It was just maggots. And I sent her home, and I stayed on the crime scene to finish processing it. And that night, when I got home and I got undressed for a bath, there were still maggots tumbling out of my clothing and crawling around on the bathroom floor. So that is an authentic account of what my life was like. What was not authentic is in the television series, the scene with the face-off between Micki and the killer. I must say, when I watched this episode for the first time, I was actually quite surprised by it, because it never really happened. I've said so many times before that killers do not target the detective or the profiler. So that didn't happen. And I'm not going to spoil it for you. Watch the series. It's a wonderful, good series. Just suffice to say that I've never been wounded. I have been stabbed in the back quite a few times, metaphorically, but I've recovered from that as well. So in real life, what happened is the serial killer was identified by the COVID team, the army team there, and he was arrested by the detective called Jan Sitole. Now, Jan Sitoli later in his life became a very high-ranking commander. But I would like to tell you a secret about Jan Sitoli. Whenever I was on a course, I would frequent the bookshops to find material just for me to read, because it took my mind off. And very often I would find Jan Sitoli also in the bookshops, looking for something to read. And I'll tell you a secret. Jan Sitoli likes cowboy books. So what happened is, shortly after they arrested him, they drove through the night and they came to my office the very next morning, very early, and I interrogated him and we got the confession. I must say, when this killer, Velaphi Ndlangamandla, sat in front of me, I was quite struck that this insignificant, very ordinary man had the capacity to hold a whole community at ransom and have a reign of terror over the whole Posa Village for such a long time. And there he sat. He was not a soldier. He was an ex-security guard, but he called himself soldier and he believed himself to be a soldier. But there he was. So Velaphi Ndlangamandla was found guilty of 19 murders, 9 attempted murders, 6 robberies, 1 attempted robbery, and some firearm-related crimes, which added 137 years to his sentence. And again, he should never, ever be let out. Never be let out. In this scene, Micki, Mark, and the detectives are having lunch, and AJ toasts her and wishes she may never stop catching killers. For the record, I never caught the killers. The detectives did. I caught them in my mind. But that night, when I sat in my bathroom, in real life, watching those maggots crawling on my bathroom floor, I realized I had a choice to make. I had reached a crossroad, and that crossroad in the sugarcane fields, the end of the pier leading to the ruin, the steps out of the abyss into the light, the end of the dead ends in the dark of night. I had to get out. I was losing my mind to the PTSD dragon. I was losing my life and my purpose. I was losing myself. Sometimes people ask me, how did you cope with all of that? And my answer was, and still is, when you are a swimmer and you swim in a lake, like the Neisner Lake where my father stayed before he passed away, you swim to the Neisner Heads. Those are the cliffs offering passage to the deep sea. And when you swim through the turbulent sea of the strait between the cliffs, and when you are through, you look back and you think, wow, that was tough, but you survived, and you still feel fit after catching your breath, and you swim further into sea, away from the shores, and you swim and you swim and you swim, and one day you realize you can see the shore no more, and you are exhausted, but if you stop, then you will drown, so you keep on swimming, and you think you have no choice, not knowing where you are or where the shore is. And then one day, utterly exhausted and depleted, you stop swimming and you make a choice. And that is the moment when you follow your faith and you find the light and you follow it, and it will lead you to a different shore where the sun is rising. And through the windows of the ruin on the pier, from the top of the kiln of the abyss, on the other side of the sugarcane fields, you will find a new life with new possibilities. And you embrace it, and you heal with time. And you may even find love again. Who knows? It is now almost 30 years later, and I have found my peace. So the television series of Catching a Killer comes to an end. And my heartfelt gratitude to the producers of CMAX, all the actors, the crew, the behind-the-scenes people, my personal friends, Kurt Oliver, Charlotte Hope, Charlie, you did a tremendous job. To Ivan Zimmerman, to Brett Wilson and Tracy Larkham and Warren Gray. To everybody in this production, you really did a wonderful, wonderful job of dramatizing my book, and thank you from my heart. This is not the end of Micki Pistorius' Profiler on Record. I have much to share with you still. We will delve into the minds of criminals, And remember, good men and good women can make a difference. So, see you next time. That's a wrap.
She was a girl with a divided heart, like the light and the dark, the divided heart. Between two continents and somewhere far home, but where it really lay was deep within her soul. But where